The smell of death hung over the village like a suffocating cloak. I walked among the mud houses, my bare feet touching the dry earth where flowers once bloomed. Each step echoed the rhythm of my sacred drum, which I carried on my back like both a burden and a blessing. The children who once ran through the alleys now lay feverish on sweat-damp mats. Their mothers wept tears that dried before even touching the parched ground. It was then that I felt the weight of my existence, being at once the one who brings disease and the one who grants healing. My skin, marked by the scars of smallpox that made me who I am, burned under the relentless sun. But it wasn't the physical pain that consumed me. It was the pain of knowing that my presence there meant something was terribly wrong with the world's balance. I stopped before the village chief's house. Its cracked walls reflected the state of despair that had overtaken everyone. Inside, I heard the muffled moans of a child. My child. Yes, because all the world's children are mine when they're sick, when they need healing, when they cry out for relief amidst the fever that devours their small bodies. I raised my right hand, feeling the power emanating from each scar, from each mark life had etched into my skin. This was the moment when I would decide whether that village would know mercy or justice. For I am Omolu, and in my hands I hold both disease and healing, both destruction and renewal. The drum on my back pulsed like a giant heart, echoing the ancestral rhythm that precedes all transformation. Let me tell you how it all began, how I became the one who walks the thin line between life and death. My name resonates through the centuries, Omolu, Obaluaye, the one who is king of the earth. But before I was a king, I was rejected. Before I was a healer, I was the sick one. Before I was feared, I was despised. I was born from the very womb of the earth, son of Nana Buruku, the great ancestral mother whose womb is the primordial clay from which all life emerges. My mother, lady of swamps and still waters, carried within her the wisdom of ancient times when the world was still young and the Oryxars walked freely among men. I remember the day I came into the world. It was not an ordinary birth, celebrated with songs and dances. It was a birth marked by pain and rejection. From my first moments, my skin bore the marks that would define me forever, wounds that opened and closed like poisonous flowers, scars that told stories yet to be lived. Nana looked at me with eyes full of tears she never shed. She knew, as all mothers know deep in their hearts, that I would carry a burden different from others, that my beauty would lie in my imperfections, my strength in my apparent weaknesses, my wisdom in the pain I would endure. "My son," she murmured, her voice echoing like the wind blowing over the swamps, "you will be great, but first you will be rejected. You will be loved, but first you will be feared. You will be a healer, but first you will know every disease that afflicts mortals." My mother's words pierced my soul like thorns that would never leave. And then it happened, what I most feared and yet expected. My own father, Oxala, the great creator from whom unconditional love was expected, could not bear my appearance. I remember the exact moment his eyes met mine. I saw in them not the paternal love every child hopes for, but horror, disgust, rejection. He turned his face away, as if my mere existence were an affront to the perfection he represented. In that instant, something within me broke and at the same time was born. The pain of rejection planted in my heart the seeds of what I would become. Oxalar ordered that I be covered, hidden from the world. Thus, I was born wearing the straw of the coast, the mario that would become my trademark. It was not just clothing. It was a barrier between me and a world unprepared to accept me as I was. Each strand of straw carried the weight of a shame that was not mine, but was imposed upon me. I grew up hidden, far from the curious and frightened gazes of the other Oryxars. My childhood was a paradox of solitude and discovery. Alone, I learned to live with the physical pain my wounds caused. But more than that, I learned to live with the emotional pain of being rejected by those who should have loved me most. It was in that solitude that I discovered my power. The diseases that afflicted my body were like stern teachers, teaching me the secrets of each illness, the mysteries of each cure. Every wound that opened on my skin connected me to all beings who suffered the same afflictions. Every scar that formed carried the knowledge of how to heal those who endured the same. My mother Nana visited me in secret, bringing not only the affection I so desperately needed, but also the ancestral wisdom that would shape my destiny. "My son," she would say, gently caressing my wounds, "the pain you feel today will transform into the compassion that heals thousands tomorrow. Your scars are maps that will guide the lost back to health." She taught me that my condition was not a curse, but a disguised gift, that I had been chosen to bear the burden of all diseases so that one day I could heal them all. That my initial rejection was necessary for me to develop the empathy needed to help the rejected, the despised, the sick whom society preferred to forget. Gradually, I began to understand that my difference was my strength, that the wounds on my body were portals through which I could access dimensions of healing others would never know. That my frightening appearance was, in fact, a protection. It repelled the superficial and attracted only those who truly needed me. For years, I lived in this seclusion, developing my powers, learning the secrets of life and death, of disease and healing. My sacred drum, which materialized in my hands during a particularly intense fever, became my constant companion. Its rhythms were not just music, they were enchantments, cures, connections to the spiritual world. Each beat of the drum echoed the pulse of life, the rhythm of a heart fighting against death, the cadence of breath that refuses to stop. I learned that healing comes not only from herbs or rituals, but from the right rhythm, the proper vibration, the harmony between the physical and the spiritual. Thus I prepared for the day I would leave my seclusion and show the world who I truly was. No longer the rejected son, no longer the hidden sick one, but Omolu, the one who commands the earth, who knows the secrets of life and death, who can both heal and cause disease. That day came when I heard the first call. It was the cry of a distant mother, the lament of an entire village being decimated by a plague. I felt in my scarred skin every symptom, every pain, every despair. It was time to leave my hiding place and show the world the power born of pain, the healing that emerged from suffering. When I finally stepped into the world, covered in my sacred straw, carrying my drum on my back, I was no longer just Oxala's rejected son. I was Omolu, and my journey of redemption and healing was just beginning. Those who first saw me fled in terror. My appearance, even covered by straw, exuded a power that frightened. But I had learned a fundamental lesson. Sometimes one must be feared before being respected, must terrify before healing, must show the power of destruction so that the gift of creation is valued. And so began my walk through the world, carrying in my hands the duality that defines me, the ability to heal and to cause disease, to give life and to take it, to be both the solution and the problem. For I learned that life is not made of absolutes, but of delicate balances that few can comprehend. In that village I mentioned at the start, where the smell of death hung like a cloak, I was about to teach another lesson about respect, humility, and the true meaning of healing. For healing is not just about eliminating disease. It is about transforming the being, teaching, showing that life is too precious to be wasted on arrogance and disrespect. Are you feeling the intensity of this story? Omolu's journey is just beginning, and the lessons he has to teach will touch your soul in ways you can't even imagine. Leave in the comments what you're feeling so far. Your connection with this narrative fuels the ancestral strength that drives these words. The sun was setting when I finally reached the village of Alaketu. Its golden and orange hues painted the sky as if they were the last brushstrokes of beauty before darkness took over everything. But it was not an ordinary darkness approaching. It was the darkness of the plague, of death, of despair that had settled in that place like an invisible parasite. My feet touched the arid ground at the village's entrance, and I immediately felt through the soles of my feet the sickly pulse emanating from the soil. It was as if the earth itself were feverish, contaminated by the pain of those living upon it. Each step I took made my drum reverberate on my back, creating a dull echo that seemed to announce my arrival. The first people who saw me hid behind their half-open doors. I saw eyes glinting in the dimness of the huts, eyes full of fear, but also of desperate hope. They didn't know who I was, but something in my presence made them feel that perhaps, just perhaps, their salvation had arrived. A man approached cautiously. He was thin, visibly weakened by hunger and worry. His clothes, which must once have been colorful, now hung in faded rags over his skeletal frame. He stopped a few meters away, clearly torn between curiosity and terror. "Who are you, stranger, covered in straw?" he asked in a hoarse voice. "What do you seek in our cursed village?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I removed the drum from my back with slow, deliberate movements. The taut leather over the sacred wood seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if it knew the time had come to fulfill its purpose. I placed it on the ground before me and began to play. The sound that emerged was not just music. It was the very essence of life, fighting against death. Each beat echoed like a heart refusing to stop, like breath insisting on continuing, like a flame that wouldn't be extinguished. The rhythm rose and fell like ocean waves, carrying with it all the ancestral wisdom I had gathered during my years of suffering and learning. People began to leave their homes. First one, then two, then entire families walked toward me as if drawn by an invisible magnet. Their faces showed a mix of fascination and fear. There was something in my drum that spoke directly to their afflicted souls, promising relief for pains they didn't even know how to name. "I am Omolu," I said at last, my voice resonating with authority born not of arrogance but of certainty in my purpose. "I am the one who walks between disease and healing, between life and death. I came because I heard the lament of your children, the weeping of your mothers, the despair of your hearts." A murmur rippled through the crowd that had formed around me. The name Omolu was not unknown to them, but to see him there, in flesh and blood, covered in the sacred straw that both hid and revealed his divine nature, was something none of them had expected to experience in their lifetime. "If you are really Omolu," said an elderly woman, approaching with faltering steps, "then you can heal my grandson. He's been dying for days, consumed by fevers no medicine can break." Her tears fell freely, each drop carrying the weight of her love and despair. I looked at her, seeing through her eyes all the pain a grandmother can bear, watching her lineage cut down by disease. It was a pain I knew well, for I carried in my own essence the memory of all the children who had ever suffered in the world. "Take me to him," I replied, picking up my drum and standing. The old woman's house was small and damp, with mud walls that seemed to sweat a sickly moisture. The smell inside was a mix of useless medicinal herbs, feverish sweat, and something subtler, the scent of hope slowly dying day by day. In the darkest corner of the room, on a mat woven from fibers that were once golden but now looked like dead straw, lay a child, no older than 6. His fragile body was racked by uncontrollable tremors, and his breath came in small gasps that sounded like pleas for help. I approached slowly, feeling in my own skin every symptom that child was experiencing. That's how my power worked. I had to feel the disease to heal it, had to carry the burden of suffering temporarily to transform it into relief. I placed my drum beside the mat and knelt. My hands, covered by the straw sleeves, hovered over the child's feverish body. I felt the heat radiating from him like a small sun in agony. His eyelids fluttered and opened, revealing eyes glazed by fever, but still able to see me with a clarity that surprised me. "Have you come to take me?" he asked, in a voice so faint it was more like a sigh. My heart clenched. How many times had I heard that question? How many children had seen me approaching and thought I was death coming to claim them? It was one of the most painful parts of my destiny, to be feared by those I most wanted to protect. "No, little one," I replied, my voice softer than it had ever been. "I came to bring you back to your grandmother, to your family, to the life that still has much to teach you." I began to play my drum again, but this time the rhythm was different. It was slower, deeper, like an ancestral lullaby carrying the power to soothe not just the body but the soul itself. Each beat resonated through the child's body, creating a vibration that began to harmonize with his fever-racing heart. I felt the disease moving, like a venomous snake reluctant to release its prey. It fought against me, trying to cling to that fragile body, but I was stronger. I knew its secrets, its weaknesses, its fears, for I had carried them all in my own flesh. The child's temperature began to drop gradually. The tremors that shook his body subsided until they stopped completely. His breathing, once coming in desperate gasps, became deeper and steadier. Color began to return to his pale cheeks. "Grandma," he murmured, trying to sit up. "I'm thirsty." The old woman let out a cry of joy and relief that echoed through the house and spread across the village like waves of hope. She threw herself beside her grandson, embracing him with a strength that seemed to make up for all the days of fear she had endured. "How can I thank you?" she asked, turning to me with tears of gratitude streaming down her wrinkled face. "You don't need to thank me," I replied, standing and placing the drum back on my shoulders. "But you must respect me. You must teach your family, your village, that healing comes with responsibility." The news of the healing spread through the village faster than the wind. Within hours, people came from all directions, carrying their sick, their desperate, their renewed hopes. I healed them all, one by one, feeling in my own flesh every disease I extracted, temporarily carrying every pain I relieved. But not everyone welcomed my presence with gratitude. Akin, the village chief, was a tall, robust man accustomed to being respected and obeyed without question. When he heard that a straw-covered stranger was healing his people, his first reaction was not relief, but indignation. How could someone wield such power in his village without his permission? He came to confront me on the third day, marching toward me with heavy steps that betrayed his irritation. Behind him came some of his advisors, older men who shared his arrogance and need for control. I was healing a young mother who had contracted an infection after giving birth when Akin arrived. He didn't wait for me to finish, showing no respect for the sacred moment of healing taking place. He simply planted himself before me and began speaking loudly enough for all to hear. "Who are you to come to my village without my permission?" he shouted, his face red with anger. "Who gave you authority to do what you're doing here?" I stopped playing my drum. The silence that followed was so profound, it seemed even the wind had ceased to blow. All eyes were on us, the arrogant chief and the straw-covered healer. It was one of those moments when destiny balances on a needle's point, where a single wrong word can change everything. "My authority," I replied with a calm that contrasted with his agitation, "comes from the pain I carry, the knowledge I've earned, and the love I have for all who suffer. I need no man's permission to exercise the gift given to me by the ancestors." Akin grew even angrier. He was not used to being challenged, especially by someone who refused to fully reveal themselves, who remained hidden behind straw like a ghost. "You're nothing but a charlatan," he roared, pointing an accusing finger at me. "A fraud disguised as a deity to deceive my people. Take off that ridiculous straw and show your lying face." A murmur of unease rippled through the crowd. They had witnessed my healings, felt the genuine power emanating from me, but they also feared their chief's wrath. They were torn between the gratitude they felt for me and the fear they had of him. I stood slowly, my drum sounding a single deep beat that seemed to make the earth tremble beneath our feet. I felt anger rising within me, not the petty, small anger of ordinary men, but the sacred anger of one who sees ingratitude displayed before the most precious gift of all, healing. "Be careful with your words, Akin," I said, my voice carrying a weight that made several people step back instinctively. "Be careful, lest your arrogance becomes your curse." But Akin was blinded by his own pride. Instead of backing down, he took a step forward, puffing out his chest like a fighting rooster. "I'm not afraid of you or your cheap tricks," he declared. "If you're really who you claim to be, then heal this small wound on my hand. Let's see if your power is real or just theater to impress fools." He extended his right hand, showing a small cut he'd gotten days earlier during a hunt. It was insignificant, already nearly healed, the kind of wound anyone would naturally recover from in a few days. I looked at his hand, then at his face, full of defiance and arrogance. I felt a deep sadness in that moment, for I knew that some lessons can only be learned through pain. I knew Akin was about to discover that toying with forces he didn't understand could have terrible consequences. "Are you certain you want me to touch your wound?" I asked, giving him one last chance to back down. "Absolute certainty," he replied with a mocking smile. "Let's end this farce once and for all." I approached him and, with a slow, deliberate movement, lightly touched the small cut on his hand. The moment my skin met his, I saw his eyes widen in surprise and then horror. For in that brief contact, he felt a fraction of the power I carried, a small taste of the connection I had with all the world's diseases. I stepped back and returned to the young mother I had been healing before the interruption. "It is done," I said simply. Akin looked at his hand, expecting to see some immediate change. When nothing happened in the first few minutes, his mocking smile returned. "See," he said loudly for all to hear, "he couldn't even pass this simple test. He's a fraud, as I said." But I knew the true lesson was only beginning. I finished healing the young mother, who stood up revitalized and thanked me with tears in her eyes. Then I picked up my drum and began to walk away. "Where are you going, fake healer?" Akin shouted behind me. "Fleeing after being unmasked?" I stopped and turned to him one last time. "I'm not fleeing, Akin. I'm leaving because my work here is done. But remember what I said. Be careful, lest your arrogance becomes your curse." And then I walked away, leaving the village with the sound of my drum echoing through the darkening afternoon. I knew I had to leave, for the lesson Akin was about to learn would be too painful to be witnessed by those who loved me. The next morning, Akin woke with his hand throbbing. The small cut, which was nearly healed, had inflamed overnight. It was red, swollen and hurt, as if stung by 1,000 bees. He tried to ignore it, telling himself it was just a coincidence. But by the second day, the inflammation had spread up his arm. On the third day, he had a fever. On the fourth, delirium. On the fifth, the entire village knew something terrible was happening to their chief. The same plague I had healed in others was now consuming the one who had disrespected the sacred act of healing. It was then that they understood who I truly was. Not just a common healer, not a charlatan or opportunist. I was Omolu, the Oryxar of healing and disease, the one who can both save and punish, depending on how he is treated. A delegation from the village came to find me. They found me a few kilometers away, resting near a stream, my drum by my side like a faithful companion. They approached with humility, with respect, with the sacred fear that should always accompany an encounter with the divine. "Omolu," said the eldest among them, kneeling before me, "forgive our chief's arrogance. He didn't know who you were, didn't understand the power you carry. Please, come back and heal him as you healed all the others." I looked at them silently for a long moment. I saw in their faces not just fear, but a newfound understanding, a respect that hadn't existed before. This was exactly what I wanted to teach, that healing is sacred, that it must be respected, that it cannot be treated with arrogance or disdain. "And what has Akin learned from his disease?" I asked. "He understood, Lord," another man replied. "He understood that it was his arrogance that brought the curse upon him. He's grieving, asking for forgiveness, begging for a chance to redeem himself." I rose slowly, placed my drum on my back, and began to walk back to the village. They followed in respectful silence, knowing they were witnessing a sacred moment. an act of divine mercy. When I reached Akin's house, I found him in a terrible state. The disease had consumed much of his arrogance, along with his physical strength. He lay on his mat, his face pale and sweaty, his eyes glazed with fever, but he still managed to recognize me when I entered. "Omolu," he murmured in a weak voice. "Forgive me. Forgive my arrogance, my blindness, my disrespect. I understand now who you are. I understand the sacred gift you carry." I approached him and placed my hand on his feverish forehead. I felt the disease there, waiting for my decision. I could heal him completely, let him suffer a bit more, or allow the disease to run its natural course. The choice was mine. "Have you learned, Akin?" I asked. "Have you learned that there are forces in this world that must be respected, that healing is sacred and cannot be mocked?" "I learned," he replied, tears streaming down his face. "I learned that I am but a man, small before the mysteries of life and death. I learned that you are far more than I could ever comprehend." I began to play my drum softly, letting its healing rhythms fill the space. Slowly, I felt the disease receding, the fever subsiding, life returning to that battered body. But I didn't heal him completely. I left some marks, some scars that would serve as permanent reminders of the lesson learned. When I finished, Akin was weak but conscious, healed but transformed. He sat up with difficulty and looked at me with a respect he had never shown any being before. "How can I redeem myself?" he asked. "How can I show that I've learned the lesson you taught me?" "By treating healing with the respect it deserves," I replied. "By teaching others that there are sacred forces in this world that must be honored. By always remembering that arrogance is the first step toward downfall." Akin's transformation represents something we all face, the confrontation between our ego and forces greater than ourselves. Have you ever gone through an experience that taught you humility the hard way? How does this part of Omolu's journey resonate with your own experiences of learning? Share your thoughts. Your reflection strengthens the ancestral energy of this narrative. In the days that followed Akin's healing, the village of Alaketu transformed in a way I had never witnessed before. It was not just a physical transformation, though the people were visibly healthier and stronger, but a profound spiritual metamorphosis that touched every soul living there. Akin, still bearing the scars I deliberately left as reminders of his lesson, became my most devoted follower. Every morning, he came to the place where I had set up my temporary camp, bringing simple but sincere offerings, fresh fruits, clean water, words of gratitude that came from the depths of his transformed heart. "Omolu?" he said one morning, kneeling before me with a humility that starkly contrasted with the arrogance he had once shown. "I would like to build a temple in your honor, a place where people can come to seek healing, but also learn about respect and gratitude." I looked at him, seeing no longer the proud man who had challenged me, but someone genuinely transformed by the experience of pain and healing. This was exactly what I hoped to achieve. Not just to heal bodies, but to heal souls. Not just to eliminate diseases, but to eradicate the arrogance and disrespect that are the true plagues afflicting humanity. "A temple is not made of stones, Akin," I replied, my voice carrying the wisdom of one who knows the deepest secrets of existence. "A temple is made of grateful hearts, open minds, souls that understand that healing is sacred. If you can transform every home in this village into a sanctuary of respect and gratitude, then you will have built the greatest temple I could ever desire." He nodded, grasping the depth of what I was saying. And that's exactly what happened. Akin became an evangelist of humility, sharing his story with all who would listen, explaining how his arrogance nearly killed him and how respect saved him. The people of the village began to seek me, not only when they were sick, but when they faced family conflicts, when they needed advice for their lives, when they sought to better understand the mysteries of existence. I became more than a healer. I became a spiritual guide, a beacon of wisdom in a community learning to value what truly matters. It was during the 4th week of my stay in Alaketu that the travelers arrived. They were merchants from a distant village who had heard rumors of the miracles happening there. They came not in search of healing, for they were in good health, but driven by curiosity and, I suspect, a skepticism that was familiar to me. The leader of the group was a man named Babatunde, tall and imposing, with intelligent eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they saw. He watched me for a long time when he arrived, his eyes trying to pierce through the straw that covered me, attempting to discern whether I was genuine or just another charlatan preying on people's credulity. "So you're the famous Omolu we've heard so much about," he said with a tone that mixed respect with challenge. "They say you can heal any disease, that you possess powers beyond human understanding." "People say many things," I replied calmly, unfazed by his provocative attitude. "The question is, what have you come to seek here, Babatunde?" He was startled to hear his name, for he hadn't introduced himself, but I knew far more about him than he imagined. I knew he was a wealthy man, accustomed to getting everything with money. I knew he had lost a son years ago to a disease no healer could cure. I knew that, despite his wealth and success, he carried an emotional wound that had never properly healed. "I come out of curiosity," he lied. "I want to see if you really have the powers they claim." His traveling companions spread through the village, observing, questioning, investigating. It was clear they had come with the intent to unmask me, to prove I was just another opportunist. But as they spoke with the locals, as they heard the sincere testimonies of healing and transformation, their attitude began to shift. Meanwhile, I observed Babatunde. I saw beyond his facade of a successful merchant. I saw the pain he carried, the guilt that consumed him for failing to save his son, the anger he directed at himself and at anyone who claimed to have healing powers. "You lost a son," I said suddenly, making him step back as if struck by lightning. "How? How do you know that?" he stammered, all his composure vanishing in an instant. "Because I carry in my skin the memory of all the children who have suffered in this world," I replied. "Because I feel in my heart the pain of all the parents who have lost a child. Your pain is my pain, Babatunde." He tried to recompose himself, to return to his posture of a skeptical merchant, but it was too late. I had touched the deepest wound in his soul, and now it bled openly. "He was only 5 years old," he murmured, tears beginning to stream down his face. "He was so full of life, so joyful. And then the disease came, and I couldn't save him. I tried everything, brought the best healers, offered all I had, but it wasn't enough." I approached him and placed my hand on his shoulder. Through that contact, I felt the full magnitude of his pain, all the guilt he carried, all the love that had nowhere to go since his son's passing. "Death is part of life, Babatunde," I said gently. "Not even I can change that, but I can help you heal the wound it left in your heart." Over the following days, Babatunde stayed in the village. He had sent his companions back, saying he had business to attend to there, but the truth was, he had found something no amount of money could buy, the possibility of healing for a pain he thought was incurable. We talked for long hours about life, death, loss, and acceptance. I told him about my own rejection, about how I had learned to transform pain into compassion, suffering into wisdom. He told me about his son, about the dreams he had for him, about the guilt he felt for not being able to protect him. "I built a commercial empire after he died," he confessed in one of those conversations. "I thought that if I became rich enough, powerful enough, I'd never lose anything important again. But I discovered you can't buy protection from the pain of loss." "The pain of loss never fully goes away," I replied, "but it can transform. It can become love that extends to other children, compassion that embraces other grieving parents, wisdom that helps others cope with their own losses." That's when I began working on the deepest healing he needed. It wasn't a physical cure, but an emotional and spiritual one. For several days, I played my drum for him, letting its rhythms penetrate the deepest layers of his soul, gradually dissolving the guilt and anger he had accumulated. Slowly, I saw the transformation unfold. Babatunde began to smile again, to find joy in the small things in life. He started playing with the village children, seeing in them not a painful reminder of his loss, but a celebration of the life his son had represented. "Omolu," he said one afternoon as we watched a group of children playing near the stream. "I understand now. My son didn't die in vain if his life and death taught me to love more deeply, to value every moment I have with others more intensely." This was exactly what I hoped he would understand. True healing isn't just about eliminating pain, but about transforming it into something that can benefit others. Loss can become empathy. Suffering can become compassion. Pain can become wisdom. When the time finally came for me to leave Alaketu, the village was completely different from the one I had found. There were no longer traces of the plague that had once ravaged it. More importantly, there were no traces of the arrogance, ingratitude, and disrespect that are the true diseases afflicting humanity. Okin had become a wise and humble leader, governing with compassion rather than authority. Babatunde had decided to stay in the village, using his wealth to help the needy and sharing his experience of transformation with others who came seeking healing. The old woman whose grandson I had healed first became a kind of informal priestess, teaching people about gratitude and respect for sacred gifts. Every person I had touched, every life I had transformed, became a multiplier of wisdom and compassion. On the morning of my departure, the entire village gathered to bid me farewell. It wasn't a sad goodbye, but a celebration of everything we had learned together. They had understood that I wasn't truly leaving. I would always be present in every act of compassion they practiced, in every moment of gratitude they experienced, in every gesture of healing they offered one another. "Omolu," said Akin, speaking for everyone, "how can we keep the wisdom you taught us alive?" "By living it," I replied simply, "by treating every act of healing as sacred, every moment of health as a blessing, every opportunity to help someone as a privilege. The true tribute you can pay me is not to build temples of stone, but to transform your hearts into sanctuaries of compassion." I placed my drum on my back and began to walk. With each step I took, I heard behind me the sounds of a transformed community. Children laughing, adults talking about dreams and hopes, the whisper of the wind through houses where peace had settled. Now, as I walk this dusty road toward the next place where my presence will be needed, I reflect on everything that happened in Alaketu. Every village I visit, every person I heal, every lesson I teach adds a new layer to my understanding of what it means to be a healer. I've learned that physical healing is just the beginning. True healing happens when people understand they are part of something greater, when they realize their health is connected to the health of the entire community, when they see that respect and gratitude are medicines more powerful than any herb. My skin, marked by the scars that made me who I am, remains my greatest teacher. Each mark reminds me that pain can be transformed into wisdom, that suffering can generate compassion, that rejection can become the foundation for a deeper acceptance of others. The drum I carry on my back pulses with the rhythm of life, constantly reminding me that I am but an instrument in the hands of destiny. My power to heal comes not from myself, but from my connection to all the forces of nature, to all the ancestors who came before me, to all the wisdom accumulated through the centuries. Sometimes I'm asked if I don't tire of carrying so much suffering, of feeling in my own flesh every disease I heal. The answer is yes, I do tire. But I also know that this is the price of true compassion. You cannot truly heal without first fully understanding the nature of suffering. The rejection I suffered from my father Oxalar, which once caused me so much pain, I now understand as a disguised blessing. If I had been accepted from the start, if I had grown up surrounded by love and admiration, perhaps I would never have developed the empathy needed to truly understand those who suffer. At dusk on the third day of my journey, I paused on a hill overlooking the region. Below, I could see several villages scattered across the valley, each with its own stories, its own sufferings, its own needs for healing. It was then that I felt a familiar presence approaching. I turned and saw my mother, Nana Buruku, walking toward me. She looked older, more tired, but her eyes shone with the same unconditional love I remembered from my childhood. "My son," she said, embracing me with a tenderness that warmed my heart, "I came to see how you are. I've heard of the wonders you've done, the lives you've transformed." "Mother," I replied, allowing myself for a moment to be just a son in his mother's embrace, "I've learned so much since I left home. I've learned that the pain I carry is not a curse but a gift. I've learned that my frightening appearance repels only those who don't truly need me." She smiled, gently caressing one of the scars on my face through the straw. "I always knew you would find your path. I always knew you would transform your pain into power, your rejection into compassion." We talked until dawn, sharing stories, wisdom, love. She told me about other Oryxars, about other journeys of transformation, about the great cosmic plan we are all part of. I told her about Alaketu, about Akin and Babatunde, about all the people whose lives had been touched by the experience of true healing. As the sun rose, she prepared to leave. "Continue your work, my son," she said. "Keep healing, keep teaching, keep showing the world that true strength comes from vulnerability, that true beauty comes from imperfections, that true love comes from total acceptance." And then she was gone, leaving me alone on the hill with my drum and my mission. But I didn't feel alone. I felt connected to everything and everyone, to every person I had healed, to every lesson I had taught, to every heart I had touched. Now, when I play my drum, its sound echoes not only in the present, but through time. Each beat carries the stories of all those I've met on my journey, the lessons learned, the transformations witnessed. It is a drum that never stops playing, for the need for healing never ceases in the world. I understand now that my journey has no end. There will always be someone needing healing, a community needing to learn about respect and gratitude, hearts wounded and waiting for transformation. And I will be there, carrying my drum, offering my gifts, teaching my lessons. The straw that covers me is no longer a hiding place. It is a sacred protection that allows people to see beyond appearances and focus on what truly matters. It is a reminder that true power often hides behind a simple facade, that true wisdom doesn't always present itself spectacularly. Each scar on my skin tells a story of overcoming. Every wound I've carried has transformed into a source of knowledge about how to heal others. Every moment of pain has become an opportunity to develop deeper compassion. This is my essence, my purpose, my joy, and my responsibility. I am Omolu, the one who carries both disease and healing, who teaches through his own vulnerability, who transforms suffering into wisdom. And as long as there is suffering in the world, as long as there are hearts needing healing, as long as there are people needing to learn about respect and gratitude, my drum will keep playing, my steps will keep walking, my hands will keep healing. For this is the nature of true love. It knows no limits. It never tires of giving. It asks for nothing in return but the opportunity to keep serving. And I, Omolu, am made of that love, shaped by that compassion, defined by that eternal mission to heal and transform. The drum plays, and its music is the very essence of life conquering death, of hope overcoming despair, of love transforming everything it touches. This is my story, but it is also the story of all those who choose to transform their pain into healing power for others. May Omolu's journey resonate deeply in your heart. May your own scars transform into sources of wisdom. May your pain become compassion for others who suffer, and may you always remember, no matter how deep your wounds, they can become the channels through which healing flows to the world. If this story has touched your soul, if it has awakened in you a new understanding of healing and transformation, share your experience. Let others know that they too carry within them the power to transform suffering into wisdom, rejection into acceptance, pain into love. For when we share our stories of healing, we multiply the ancestral power that moves the world toward compassion and true understanding.